Hey,
Welcome
Sabby.
back, Jimmy.
Great to see you. How are you?
I'm doing good. I've been busy. I took a little bit of a break, or like a weekend break, if you want to call it. But since I got back, I've been hella busy.
All right. It was really great meeting you and your husband.
It was great to meet like you. I know the second time I saw you, but it was great to meet Steph as well. For those who don't know, I went to see Jimmy Dore show live in Northampton, Massachusetts, which is a little bit towards like Western Mass. But it was a really great show. I thought it was pretty funny, and it was pretty interesting. Like, one of the things I noticed being there is that you tend to have a way to unite people, because the audience, it's not like you go there and everybody is like a former, like a Bernie supporter or anything like that. Like, there's different people from all different like political ideologies. How do you think you're able to bring different people together, not just in comedy but also with your show?
I think what people crave is authenticity. And I think they see that I'm authentic and that I'm not trying to bullshit them, and that I don't blame them for the trouble of the country. So that's what the establishment and the establishment media has us doing, Sabby, is they know we're feeling pain, but they want us to be distracted by our neighbor. And they want us to blame our neighbor for the pain we're feeling. As I said in the show, they did a controlled up demolition of our economy where only a handful of millionaires and billionaires profited and everyone else got crushed. And they want me to blame my neighbor for the pain we're feeling after. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to love my neighbor because they're hurting just the way that everybody else is from this oligarchy and this psyop that this government is. And so I was always, I was a big George Carlin fan. He was the guy who influenced me probably the most, maybe comedically. And when I would go to his shows, I always marveled at the audience. The audience was, there were, first time I ever saw him was at the Universal Amphitheater here in Los Angeles, like 20 years ago. And I'll never get over it. It was just, I saw hippies, I saw guys in three-piece suits, I saw senior citizens, I saw teenagers, I saw black, I saw white, I saw everything. And I was just like, wow, that's a real audience. And, I'm not saying I've duplicated that exactly, but I think I've come very close, way closer than I ever thought. And that's really makes me feel good when people who disagree with me politically tell me that they do, but they still love me and they still like to watch my show. When I was in Hartford, Connecticut, I did a meet and greet after the show where I was meeting the people. And I had a guy come up and he said, I'm a conservative and you saved my family. People say stuff like that to a YouTuber. And then I had another guy come up to me, this giant man, and he says, I'm a conservative, no kidding around, but I love you. And he said the word love. And so it really makes me proud that I can reach across the aisle and those people can disagree with me on things, but they don't feel judged. And they feel like we're all in this together, even if we disagree, and that we're brothers, we're not enemies, and we all share common goals. And that's what my message, since I saw the Democrats screw Bernie. And that's going to keep being my message. And, I'm lobbying Cornel West to pick up that message. And I hope he can do it, because that would be really exciting. That's a real way to stick it to the establishment. You can't come in giving Joe Biden a pass. You got to tell people Joe Biden is a fascist, and you can redefine that word if you want, but then that just makes you look like an unserious, right? And that makes you look phony. So don't do that. And let's stay to real definitions. And if Joe Biden is a fascist, let's say it. And if Donald Trump is a fascist, let's say it. But everybody's calling everybody a grifter and a fascist just because they don't like them politically. And it's just a term of division, and nobody even knows what that means. People use the word fascist. They have no idea what it means. People think grifter means that you sell T-shirts. That's what they think it means. People call me a grifter. I go, why? What am I grifting about? They go, well, you sell T-shirts. Everybody sells T-shirts. So anyway, thanks for that question. Thanks for coming to that show. It's honest, I can't tell you how overwhelmingly grateful I am that I'm able to tour and meet my fans like this, and that I have fans like this. And I'm actually able to have a message that does exactly what you says, that brings people together. And that's what we need. We need to bring people together, because that's the only way we're going to beat the establishment. We're not going to, just like Christian Smalls, when he organized with a bunch of Trump voters on Staten Island, he didn't go to the shop floor and go, who here's a Boogaloo boy? You're out. Who here's a libertarian? You're out. Who's a gun nut? You're out. Who's a Trumper? You're out. That's not how you organize. You go, who wants to come together and oppose the richest man in the world, Jeff Bezos? You want to come together and we can organize for our little bit of the money we're out make? That's how you organize. And you don't organize by dividing people. You don't label people. You organize around common ideas and common interests. And I really hope that, I know Cornel knows how to do that. I hope he can pull it off.
Yeah, I want to get into Dr. West in just a second, but one of the things that people were asking me, like after I went to your show, they were just like, how does Jimmy tour and still do his show on YouTube? And I want to ask you that question because I've been curious about that too.
Not easy.
That's what I was wondering. Like, do you have a team, like people that travel with you, like when you go on tour?
It's just me and Steph when we go on tour, but we just hired a tour manager. So we just had on Tuesday night, we hired our tour manager because we can't do, you have to, there's a lot to do, especially when if you go and do like 3 or 4 dates in a row, there's a lot of travel involved. You're tired the whole time. You got to get up and drive a couple of hours to the city, and you got to make sure you're at your tip top at 8 o'clock and sometimes midnight, right? We're doing 2 shows. Sometimes you got to make sure you're in perfect form. So you try to get as much rest as you can. You have to plan your meals. It's not easy. And then you have to do sound checks and light checks hours before the show. And then you got to try to find, and it's not easy. So we just hired a tour manager to go and do our merch, right? So when you get there, you have to set up all your t-shirts so I can grift and stuff like that. Well, we don't have anybody doing that for us. And so we need someone to do that. So you're exactly right. And it's not easy doing, we do 3 days a week in the studio, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And that produces 30 clips a week. And so we'd like to drop 5 clips a day. So that's been our model, and that's worked for us. And it's not easy to do it. That's why we just hired a tour manager. Thanks for asking.
I can hear you. Yeah, because you're also going from, a lot of times you're going from the West Coast to the East Coast, and then there's the time difference, time zone difference you have to deal with there. So that in itself can be a doozy, I think, sometimes. But yeah, I think a gamer actually mentioned, I was live with JB like an hour or so ago. A gamer mentioned in the chat that you might be taking a break soon, like a 2-week break. Okay.
Yes. Starting next Monday, we're going to be on a 2-week break.
Okay. But Jimmy, this means you're actually going to take a break this time, right? Like you're not going to do, because I know sometimes you do breaks and then I still see you pop up on your show and I'm like, what?
Yeah, well, sometimes when Aaron fills in, I'm still at the house and I just get it in me and I got to come say something. I have to get it out of me. It's not good. So I'm going to try and take a real, so I'm going to shut down production for 2 weeks, see if we can actually take a real vacation.
Awesome. So Cornel West. So recently, I interviewed Dr. Cornel West like the week that he did announce that he was going to run for president, running third party. I was very surprised that he was running for president because I did ask him before last time he was on the show if he would ever consider doing it. And he said he'd rather be in the crack house than in the White House. So that told me like he saw some sense of urgency, like the people need something, like it's time for people to really break away from this duopoly. And one thing I've been saying for a while before he announced is that if we had somebody with a big name run third party, this actually was entertained in 2020 with Jesse Ventura. At one point, there was talks about him possibly running. Just imagine what could have happened if he did. So now we have someone that a lot of people know. I feel like Cornel West, like he's liked by different generations. He's liked by people of different races, different genders. Like a lot of people love Dr. West. And then this happened. And I don't know if you saw this earlier today. Cornel West is already polling at 6% as a third party candidate. This is the Emerson College poll. And it says Joe Biden, 44%, Donald Trump, 43%. And then when you come down here, that was someone else, 9%, undecided, 4%. And then when you come down here and you add in Cornel West's name, he's already polling at 6% as a third party candidate. You only need 5% to get the federal funding. So he's already above the percentage to get the funding. And this is what I was trying to tell people is like, you need someone with a big name. I want to get your take on that. How do you feel about where he's polling right now? And how do you feel about his chances in this crazy system?
Well, that was always, yes, it's such a perilous time, and the establishment is so corrupt that, and people are so desperate for a third party that I even entertained it for a little while. I'm so glad that Cornel is doing it, and the fact that he is polling at 6% already, I think, is a big deal. So great for him, and that's the plan was always, just like Ralph Nader laid out, that you don't have to get, if you can get 10% in the polls, 5 to 10% in the polls, you can now become a kingmaker, because now neither party can get elected without you. You have 10% of the voting electorate. You can swing a vote, because usually it's only a percentage or 2 points that divides the presidential candidates. And so I don't care if it's a Republican who ends the war and invests that money back here, or a Democrat. I don't care if it's a Republican or a Democrat that gives us Medicare for all. I don't care if it's a Republican or a Democrat that gives us a minimum wage, or legalizes marijuana, empties out the jails of nonviolent drug criminals. I don't care if it's a Republican or Democrat. And that's what I hope happens. I hope Cornel stays in the race. I hope he builds a strong campaign. I hope he polls at 10% at least, and then he can become kingmaker, or something crazier could even happen, and he could win. I think that if he has the right message, I think he can win.
It's interesting because one of the things I was talking about earlier too, in reference to him, is he went from the People's Party to the Green Party. Obviously, I know about the issues with the People Party. I had already talked to him about that as well. But how do you feel about that Howie Hawkins faction of the Green Party, the ones who are, for whatever reason now, or like have pro-war talking points, which is not yeah.
They're CIA. That's all. I mean, CIA infiltrates parties and things, and that they're CIA. Is there another explanation how the guy who's in the Green Party could sound like a CIA guy? I mean, that's crazy. More than a Democrat. I mean, it's what they were for: lockdowns, they're for mandates, they're for the war, they're for Russiagate. Howie Hawkins is CIA, and if that isn't clear to people, then they're gonna be chagrined, because that guy is CIA.
Yeah, I can see that. I think one of the goals, at least that I know some of us have, is to get people to register for Green Party so that they can vote for Dr. West in the primary. I just found out earlier today, Chris Hedges had an interview on Bad Faith. It sounds like Jill Stein is actually going to be Dr. West's campaign manager.
Oh, it's great.
And this is huge, because Jill Stein, she's done this. She knows what it takes. She knows how to do it. She knows like the smears that he's going to get, and he's getting some now, but it's going to get worse as we get closer and closer to 2024. And I just want people to be prepared for that. But I think that's huge that Jill Stein is stepping in there.
They already called him right wing. You know that, right? You see, yep. MSNBC says his campaign has right wing DNA. Isn't that great? I mean, it's great that they just reveal the game. They can't help themselves, right? So I've been telling people that since Bernie, that the first thing that a Democrat does, and the establishment does, if you get to the left of them, is they don't engage your ideas. The first thing they do is they smear you as a right winger, and then maybe they'll entertain your ideas. But the first thing is to discredit and smear you as a right winger, and they've been doing that to me for 7 years now. And so it's great to see it happen to somebody like Cornel West, because it sounds so ridiculous.
No, I agree. And my thing is just have the conversation with that person. And it seems like obviously some people just don't want to have that conversation. But one of the things I noticed too, the week that he announced, mainstream media immediately covered it. He was immediately on mainstream media. So that actually debunks that myth that people say that third party candidates will not get the coverage. As I said before, if it's someone with a big name, they can get that coverage.
That's right. If you're famous enough, I bet if I declared, I wouldn't get any interviews, but I would get a lot of smear pieces. But Cornel West is a little too big for that. You know, he's been on all those shows before, multiple times, so he's a little, so that's exactly, your theory is exactly right. If you get someone famous enough, they can't ignore them, and they're not ignoring Cornel. And there he is polling at 6% before his campaign even really starts.
That's right. How do you feel about RFK Jr.? Because I know we got a chance to chat about this a little bit when you were in Massachusetts, but he's confusing to me. I think someone like him should be running outside of the
No doubt.
duopoly.
No doubt about it. It makes absolutely no sense that he's running inside the Democratic Party, because you and I know that they're not going to let him win. That's why they have super delegates. They don't have super delegates to make sure the will of the people is expressed. They have super delegates so they can control the establishment, and the billionaire class can control who the Democratic nominee is. And there you go. They never thought they would have to worry about that in the Republican Party, but then Trump came along and they can't control him. So I bet they wish they had super delegates in the Republican Party. So in lieu of having super delegates, they keep trying to throw him in jail. And so I really wish RFK Jr. would run, but it's too late. He's going to run as a Democrat. I think it's sweet. I think it's great that he's run. I mean, the fact that he's in the race, because he will put a big hurt on Joe Biden, and he'll expose him, and that'll make him more susceptible to Cornel West. If Joe Biden gets hurt bad enough, Cornel West could win this. And I think he can get hurt bad enough, because you see what's happening on Twitter now. I always told people I was cautiously optimistic about Elon Musk buying Twitter. I know he's in bed with the military and the CIA and the defense industry and all that stuff, and that he's a billionaire. But all he had to do was this, what he's doing right now, exposing Peter Hotez and the COVID lies, and exposing that the establishment runs from honest debates, because we all know the truth doesn't mind being questioned. It's lies that doesn't like scrutiny. And so he's exposing that right now. And that is a huge, huge thing. If he does nothing else with Twitter, this is worth him buying it, because now people can expose the fraud that Fauci is, that Dr. Peter Hotez is, that Walensky is at the CDC, Collins is at the NIH, that the whole thing was, right? And that's why, remember, that's why Tucker Carlson got fired. He didn't get fired for lying, just like Julian Assange isn't in prison for lying. Edward Snowden isn't in Russia because he lied. They didn't torture Chelsea Manning because she lied. They did all that because those are the people telling the truth, right? And so when Tucker Carlson told the truth about Ukraine, and then he brought RFK Jr. on a show to tell the truth about how Big Pharma corrupts corporate news, they had to fire him the next day, as Roger Ailes said he would 10 years ago. He told RFK Jr. that 70% of his advertising on the news comes from Big Pharma, and he loved RFK Jr. They were personal friends. I don't know if you know that. RFK Jr. and Roger Ailes were personal friends because of a freak thing. They spent, I guess, 2 months in a tent somewhere together, and so they knew each other, and he would go meet with Roger Ailes about vaccines, and he was like, I agree with everything you're saying, but if I put you on the show, I'd have to fire you because Rupert Murdoch would call me 2 seconds later. And so that's exactly what happened. Tucker Carlson, they took away all his advertisers. He started telling the truth about the Ukraine war, and then he brought on RFK Jr. to tell how corporate news is corrupted by Big Pharma advertising, and he was gone. And so that, let's remember it. And that they're not angry at RFK Jr. for lying. They're angry because RFK Jr. is telling a lot of truths that they don't want to hear, and they can't rebut. If they could rebut him, believe me, they'd be tripping over themselves to humiliate RFK Jr. in an honest debate. But they know Joe Rogan is honest, and he won't slant the table, and he will give. And so that's why nobody will go near him. And anyway, so I know I'm getting off track a little bit, but it's great that we have Twitter now. It's a really big deal.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know with RFK Jr. too, I know his position on Israel and Palestine. I don't agree with him on that position. I've been very vocal about that. But I'm curious to see, is he actually going to take up some of these offers to go onto these shows to have that discussion? Like Max Blumenthal, for example, said on Rising, he invited RFK Jr. to come onto the Gray Zone to have that discussion with him. I think that would be a good person to have that discussion with, right? But I wonder if he's going to be willing to do that, because it seems like he has not done that yet, and so to speak, except for with Glenn Greenwald. And that interview, that discussion was a little bit heated when it got to that conversation. But I'm wondering if he will do that, and I hope that he will, because I really do think someone like Max could really educate him on that issue.
Do you really think it's because he's not educated on? I don't know what it is. It's like you said before, it's confusing. There's a chance that he doesn't understand the Israeli-Palestine argument, I guess. What was also surprising to me was when he admitted that, he didn't get Russiagate right and that he fell for that. Like, how the fuck? And then I don't, that was mind blowing to me. And he was wrong on the Ukraine war at first, but now I guess he's got his mind right and he got the info. And so that's good to see. He gave a fantastic speech in New Hampshire. Was it 2 days ago?
Yep.
About war, about the biggest job of the president is to keep America out of war. Holy cow. Can you imagine that? They're going to kill him. There's no way that they're going to let him be president. And anyway, it's great to have him and Cornel in the race. And thank God that RFK Jr. isn't a Bernie Sanders. He's got balls of steel and he's got a spine. And he's taken all the slings and arrows to tell the truth about vaccines. And so I think that's a guy who will stand up to people.
Yeah, it's really interesting. We see him going places that Bernie Sanders was afraid to go, or Bernie knew that if he did, that his career would be over.
Right.
I think that's really what it's about. Like, Bernie didn't want to lose like his political career. There was also a threat at one point in reference to like his wife. I know that she was threatened at one point when Bernie was running. So he just didn't want, I felt like you can't come out here and call for a political revolution and you're not really willing to take part in the revolution part.
Yeah, remember he would start every speech, sounds like you're ready for a revolution. Well, guess what? I'm not. And I'm going to just go ahead and suck Joe Biden's cock. And that's what he's been doing.
Yeah, it's a mess. Do you think they're going to put someone in Joe Biden's place? Because these are some of the rumblings I'm hearing. Some people are saying that they think Gavin Newsom, they're going to like swoop him in and get him into place. And my whole thing is, I don't live in California. You do. But my thing is fix California first.
Yeah,
because I've talked to so many people that have vacated California and have moved to cheaper states because they just like, we can't afford to live here anymore.
He's got a horrible track record in California. I don't know what he's got nothing to run on except his hair. But it does look like that he is this for the last at least 6 months. He's been angling to run for president. He's been taking on DeSantis. He went to Florida for a fundraiser, I'm pretty sure. So I don't understand. So that's what it looks like. Or maybe he's just doing that to try to encourage the Democrats to throw Joe Biden over the bridge, right? Maybe that's what he's doing, hoping that they will do that. Because the people who have to decide this is Wall Street. Those are the people who chose Joe Biden in the first place, and those are the people who put him in the presidency. So if the handlers on Wall Street decide that they can't do it with Joe Biden again, they're going to have to look for someone else. Now, the first person they chose was Kamala Harris. She was their first knighted candidate, and she got it on Martha's Vineyard. She was the first one for the 2020 election. Well, she couldn't get a vote. So then they had to switch gears and they went to their second most reliable tool. Joe Biden's been a tool of Wall Street his entire career in the banking industry, in the credit card industry, the financial services industry, his entire career. That's why you can't declare bankruptcy, because of Joe Biden. So they went to him. So that's how this happens. So it's not going to be and it won't be a political person. It'll be from someone from the donor class or a group of people from the donor class that will decide if Joe Biden is a viable candidate or not, and who will be the second one. And then they will choose that person. And it seems like Gavin Newsom is positioning himself to be that person when they decide to choose. That's what I think is happening.
And I honestly think if Joe Biden were to stay in this and he wins, if he were to win, I think he would resign that first year and you guys would be stuck with Kamala Harris.
Yeah, I bet you that's what they would do. They don't care if Kamala Harris is president. They would love it because she's even, she'd be like their, if it was like if Dan Quayle became president, that's too old. Or if they love, like when George Bush was president, they completely controlled him, right? Because they just put Dick Cheney in there and then he controlled the whole show. And that like they like an empty head. And Kamala Harris is an empty head.
I agree. Jimmy, what's your take on in reference to the Russia-Ukraine war? So I'm hearing news, I feel like every other day coming out from that conflict. What's really interesting to me is that I just saw recently Ilhan Omar on Twitter complaining about Modi coming to visit the White House. And she listed off all of these items that she said were very problematic in reference to Modi. And one of them was racism. And so I replied to Ilhan Omar and I'm like, didn't you vote to like fund Nazis in Ukraine? Like it's the hypocrisy from people like her, from people like AOC. It's like they want to call out other things that are not in their interest, especially if it's being pushed by the Republican Party. But they're guilty of this too because they supported this war. And I still don't hear any of them calling for any type of peace. Most of the peace people calling for peace or calling to end it are either on the Republican side, the Libertarian side, or it's the activists outside fighting for those things, not the Democrats for the most part.
Hey, turns out the Justice Democrats are a bunch of war pigs. Bunch of goddamn war pigs. The worst thing you could be as a lefty, they're war pigs. That's the worst thing you could be. And they are that. And you're going to have people like Crystal Ball and Kyle Kalinske tell you to vote for them. And that's the smart thing to do because they're millionaires and they don't give a shit what happens in this country. They just want to go to parties. So, yeah, it's I don't know what else to tell you.
It's crazy. And I also think the other thing too, Marianne Williamson, also another candidate that's challenging Joe Biden. Again, I said the same thing to her. You should be running outside of the duopoly, not in it. She already ran before, so she already knows like what's going to happen. And when we look at the polls, like she's not polling, I think, the way that some people thought that she would. I felt like her takes on the war situation, I'm like, you kind of sound like Joe Biden to me. So why would people vote for you if you're making some of the same talking points that Joe Biden is making?
Yeah. Yes, I agree with you. I don't know what else to say about it. I don't know what else to say. I agree with you. It's why do you think she's running?
Oh man. I'm going to be honest here. So brace yourself. I think it's two things. I think one, I think there is some frustration from her about the way this country has gone. I really do feel that she is frustrated by that economically, how this country has turned out. I think that's part of it. But to add to that, she was also asked to run. She was recruited. Like Kyle and Crystal, they admitted this on the show that we are trying to get you to run. So she was recruited to do it. And then the other thing I think is just this feels like a vanity project to me because I feel like you've already been in. I said the same thing to Andrew Yang when he was on this show. I was like, what is this whole point of this forward party? He's like, well, it's more like a caucus, not a party. You can be a Republican or a Democrat or independent, but you're still third party. I'm like, what is the point of this? I said, that doesn't make any sense. When people ask for a third party, they want something separate from the duopoly. They don't want someone who's a part of the duopoly. That doesn't work. So to me, it's not genuine. It does not feel genuine to me. And that's a big part of the problem, I think. But again, I think a big part of it was she was asked to do it.
Yeah, well, good luck to her and the kids over at Breaking Points. Good luck to them.
Do you feel that like when it comes to independent media today, because I know like when I started watching left independent media, this was, Bernie 2016. So things were a lot different back then. Do you feel like there seems to be this model now that people feel like they have to follow where they have to basically surround their channel around a left or progressive candidate in order to succeed? And I asked that because of the Bernie Sanders movements. I feel like that helped a lot of people grow when Bernie ran 2 times in a row. But then after 2020, it seemed like people just kind of seemed like they were in limbo. It's like, what do we do now? We don't have a candidate. And now there is a progressive candidate, but it seems like that's not the person that most people wanted.
Yeah, I don't know what's the question?
Do you feel that, like in reference to independent media now, do you feel like because of that Bernie movement that people feel like they need to have a progressive candidate to push?
Oh, okay. So, well, I can tell you for sure that being a Bernie Sanders, that whole Bernie Sanders movement is what really helped launch my channel. And, I was very vocal. Even after the Young Turks had given up on the Bernie Sanders campaign, I stayed with the Bernie Sanders campaign. And that's what I had that saying, don't freak out. And because people were freaking out, and I'm like, no, don't worry. He's going to be good. He's going to make it to the convention. So it really helped my channel. And then, of course, Bernie revealed himself. He got absolutely nothing. He demanded nothing for his support of Hillary Clinton and the Democratic war machine. He asked nothing to have his supporters vote for Wall Street and the military-industrial complex. He asked for nothing. They still have super delegates. They still take fossil fuel money. They still take Wall Street money. They still take every money. He got them to do absolutely nothing. And the same thing happened in 2020. He got absolutely nothing for his support and asking his supporters. And he's never asked his supporters to do anything. So do I think that I know other people have speculated that Mild Kalinsky hooked his wagon to her to try to get over the million sub. Isn't it funny? He had 977,000 subscribers, and then he lied about me twice. Him and Crystal lied about me twice, and he got ratioed twice on 2 videos about me. He lost thousands and thousands of subscribers and never recovered until he hooked his wagon to Marianne Williamson. So that was somebody else pointed that out. I think Dude Dissonance.
Yeah.
Pointed that out. I never thought of it like that, but I knew for sure he stopped cold and lost subscribers and didn't get another subscriber for 2 fucking years after he lied about me and people saw through him and he got ratioed. He had to build up, I guess, a whole new audience, I guess.
Yeah, it's I think 2024 is going to be wild because this time is different. I feel like everybody is not aligning around the same candidate. Whereas before, for the most part, we were all like, yeah, let's support Bernie Sanders. And now it's just like, it did not work in that way. I think that people thought it would with Marianne Williamson. I think they thought people would be excited about Marianne. I was not excited about Marianne. I was just like, after Bernie, this is where we go.
Could you imagine supporting someone inside the Democratic primary and it not be RFK Jr.? It just seems crazy. I mean, I'm with you. I'm on the independent. I'm third party. I'm all that. I know they're going to crush them and all that stuff. But it's just like they're so. But they were also the people supporting her were also wrong about Ukraine. They were also wrong about COVID, and that's so humiliating to them that they're wrong about COVID. They're wrong about the FDA, the CDC. They're wrong about everything. They're wrong about lockdowns. So I bet they're humiliated and embarrassed, and that's why they can't bring themselves to support RFK Jr. And then she did that stupid interview with him and then again, same thing. She was right at 970 something thousand. And she did that. They lost thousands of subscribers because everybody saw what a bad faith job Crystal Ball did with RFK Jr. And that she would fit right in at MSNBC, and everybody sees that. So yeah, that's my answer.
Yeah. Do you think that RFK Jr., do you think he could win over more people if he changed his position on some things? Like, for example, obviously, I think his anti-war stance is phenomenal. Like, that should not change. But one of the things I heard him say recently on Rising, he was asked, would he raise taxes like on the rich? And he kind of walked around it a little bit, but was just kind of like, well, I don't want to make any drastic like changes to like that kind of thing.
I saw that, and to me, it looked like a politician trying to make sure he didn't get trying to preempt. That's it. So trying to preempt having attack pieces or attack videos of him saying, I'm going to raise taxes, right? So that he doesn't want to be able to be pigeonholed by a guy, typical Democrat, wants to raise your taxes. So I think he wants to make the tax burden more equitable. But they're going to turn that. So I think he's being very careful not to talk in sound bites about that. And I did see him talk around that, and I knew that's what he was doing. That's what I thought he was doing anyway.
Okay, yeah, because I was curious about that. I was like, why is he? I was like, just come out and say it, yes or no. Like, what are you going to do? Yeah, and then you know what?
Have you heard he's not for Medicare for all?
So the way that I heard him frame it on Breaking Points was that he agrees with Medicare or universal health care with the option of, a private choice. So still leaving that opportunity for big pharma to be there. And that's the same thing. I mean, Pete Buttigieg just said, and other people had said that, like, yeah, we should still have that private option. So I was kind of surprised by that. But to me, it's like, if you're an environmental lawyer, you've seen like some of the medical issues that people in these towns have had after they've breathed in like these chemicals. Yeah. So you should be for universal health care.
Well, I think he said he is for universal health. To me, when I heard him, to me, it sounds like he's for what Tulsi was for, which was the Australian model. So everybody has to pay into Medicare for all, right? Everybody's guaranteed health care. But then if you want extra, you're allowed to buy in private, but everybody's in. You don't get to opt out. And so I'm and their Australia's healthcare system was ranked number 2 in the world by certain organizations, certainly much better than the United States and Canada. And so I'd be okay with that. And I think what that position is, to me, it sounds like, I don't know, I can't read his mind. To me, it sounds like this is a much better. I can sell this to the country. I can sell universal health care with you also being able to get private. So it wouldn't scare the shit out of the people you need to come on board to get universal health care. To me, that's what it sounds like. And I think that's what Tulsi's was too, right? Because it does scare people, especially now after COVID. People don't want to give their control away to the government. And so it's that people always tell me about that. Well, Jimmy, what do you say about Medicare for all now after COVID? And I say, I still for Medicare for all, because the same people who, it wasn't the government running COVID policy, it was big pharma running COVID policy. And so when I go to my doctor, I got big pharma in between me and my doctor. And I want to get big pharma out, and I want a G-man in between me and my doctor, because at least the G-man doesn't have a profit motive. And that's the difference. And that's what I'm, so if you think that not having Medicare for all somehow empowers you, that is a mistake. All that does is empower the criminals who own the government. So if we can get Medicare for all, it takes some of that power away from those criminals who own the government. That's the message I'm giving to people.
Jimmy, how do you feel about Tulsi Gabbard now? Because I know she's changed a little bit from when she ran in 2020.
She still tells the truth about war, and they still smear her because of it. That's why people don't realize. That's why they hate Tulsi Gabbard. They hated Tulsi Gabbard because she first endorsed Bernie Sanders, didn't take corporate money, called the Democrats out for it, and then she told the truth about Syria. And that's you can't do that, right? And that's when the former Secretary of State, First Lady nominee for the Democratic Party, called a sitting officer in the military a Russian asset. That when Trump did that, the whole country almost melted down. Oh my God. But everybody thought it was okay because the propaganda said it was okay, because everybody made Tulsi Gabbard out to be a traitor to our country because she told the truth about Syria, and now she's telling the truth about Ukraine. And so I keep trying to remind people that that's why they hated Tulsi. They hated Tulsi because she told the truth about Syria and the Democratic Party, and she stepped down as vice chair from the DNC so she can endorse Bernie. And then Bernie was the guy who stuck a knife in her. Bernie was the guy, because she wasn't supposed to be allowed to run against him in 2020. She wasn't supposed to be allowed to run against him. And well, she was allowed to run against him. But so he was a real piece of it when it came to dealing with her. And I just like to remind people of that. So I don't endorse every take of any politician. I don't endorse every take that Tulsi has. I don't endorse every take RFK Jr. I don't endorse every take from Cornel West, right? So there's always the room for disagreement. But what I loved about Tulsi was that she stood up to the war machine, and certainly Bernie won't do it. Bernie's a war pig.
Yeah, she was basically next to be the DNC darling. Like, they loved Tulsi Gabbard when she walked in lockstep with them. But the moment she decided to endorse Bernie Sanders, that was they were like, that's it. Your political career in the Democratic Party, you might as well just pack it up.
That's right. And that's when everybody started talking about Modi.
Yeah.
Hey, I've never heard anybody talk about Modi anymore. Isn't that funny? So finally now, Ilhan Omar, it's 3 years later, somebody brings up Modi. That was, again, manufactured bullshit.
How do you feel about, in reference to Julian Assange? I mean, I know you're obviously pro free the political prisoners. How do you feel about when we talk about people like Julian Assange? There's other political prisoners I just interviewed. They were the Peltier kids, Leonard Peltier, another political prisoner. How do you feel about most of the time, most of these candidates don't even mention it? And also, do you think that's even going to be a topic of discussion on the general debate stage?
Only if Cornel West brings it up. And no, they won't bring up Julian Assange, only if Cornel West brings it up. So hopefully he'll bring it up, and hopefully they'll have debates. I bet they're going to find a way not to have debates.
What do you think? You mean in the general election?
Yeah.
Well, I hope if that happens, I hope the American people see through that.
They already got, the debates used to be run by the Women's League of Voters or the League of
Yep.
Women Voters. And then they got rid of it. And then the Democrats and Republicans, AKA corporate America, decided to take it away from the League of Women Voters. And they're going to have their own presidential debates. Corporate America is going to do it. I mean, the people who own the Democrats and the Republicans. And so that's why we have the debates we have. And that's why we have the shitty questions we have. They pick the journalists and they pick the candidates and they pick the format. It's all control. This is all theater. Those aren't real debates.
Do you think that because Kim Iverson was chosen to do this, by the way, like my audience said they thought that Kim Iverson should host like her own primary debate for these candidates, for RFK Jr., for Marianne Williamson, and now Cornel West. I asked Kim about it, and Kim said that she thinks it should be bigger than her. And then other people brought up people like Joe Rogan. Do you think that Joe Rogan could be someone good to host like just a separate thing for the American people to see?
Yes, I think it would be great. I don't think he's interested in primary politics. I think that it doesn't matter how big or small Kim's channel is. I think that that show would be big. You know what I mean? Even if it was on a tiny channel, that would be that piques everyone's interest. Everyone would tune in to see it. So it would be great to see her do it.
I think so too. Just that way, the American people at least get to hear how they feel on these issues in some way, shape, or form. Like, obviously, we know the Democratic Party said they're not going to do that in the primary. But at the same time, if there's another outlet that's willing to do that, I think that would be huge, even if Elon Musk did it on Twitter.
But the Democratic Party doesn't allow their candidates to debate outside of sanctioned debates, right?
So they can't.
They're not allowed. If you're running in the Democratic Party and you want to go do a debate that's not sanctioned, I think that's not okay.
Wow.
I'll ask your audience to fact check me on that, but I'm almost positive that that's the case, because I remember last time somebody wanted to have a debate and the DNC said you can't do that. You can't have a debate outside of the blah blah blah. So your audience fact check me on that, but I'm pretty sure that's true.
Oh, that sucks. Do you think any of these candidates, like, do you think RFK Jr. or Marianne Williamson, for example, when they lose, because I don't think the DNC will let them have a chance, do you see either one of them possibly doing a dirty break?
Only RFK, but I don't see it. I mean, of the two, I would put the money on RFK to do it, because he's signaled he won't endorse Joe Biden. He hasn't said it explicitly, but he said he's not going to endorse anybody who's a warmonger, or I might be paraphrasing. Now, Marianne Williamson is going to endorse Joe Biden. She's, I don't know if she said as much, but it's obvious that that's what she's going to do. So, yeah, I don't know, no chance of hers, but there is a chance of RFK Jr. going rogue. But, did we ever find out, Sabby, for sure? I saw in your interview with Marianne Williamson, you asked, that you said you made the assertion that they all have to sign an agreement that they have to pledge to the winner of the primary. And she said she never had to sign something like that. So do we ever find out? Did you ever find out if that was real?
I haven't. So Jesse Ventura, when I interviewed him, he was the one that actually told me about that there's this pledge that they have to sign. And so apparently, like when Bernie Sanders ran in 2016, Jesse Ventura approached him at the very beginning and said, if you lose to Hillary Clinton, will you join me in starting a third party movement? And he said Bernie Sanders told him, nope, I've already pledged to support Hillary Clinton.
Oh, wow.
The very, very beginning. I think you should bring him on, Jimmy. I'm not sure if you've interviewed Jesse Ventura, but you should bring him on, because he revealed a lot of information in reference to that particular race.
I used to fill in for him at RT. I used to be the fill-in guest host for Jesse Ventura.
Yeah, I know. I miss RT. I feel like everybody, like Lee Camp, Abby Martin, Jesse, Chris Hedges, they all had really good shows on there.
Yeah, they all missed COVID, but who cares? Isn't that funny? They all got it wrong.
Yeah, I think a lot of that came from like the fear mongering from mainstream media. And if you were my state, like we were completely shut down. So it was just like, what do you do? I feel like we couldn't really reach the outside world, so to speak. Meanwhile, friends of mine that lived in Florida, they were just living life as normal, like nothing had happened.
Just living life, man. I know, and we made fun of them, and yeah, I don't know. I don't know how people. Once I found out that they were suppressing doctors, right? That they were censoring, and who they were censoring. I don't know. I was just like, and how could you not be pissed off? I still don't understand how my friends in comedy and my friends in YouTube in politics aren't screaming and don't have rage, which I do have. I have rage over the COVID policy and the way people weren't allowed to ask questions and how everybody shamed people for asking questions, like somehow that was the smart thing to do. Like being in an intellect wouldn't question the vaccines. An intellect wouldn't question COVID policies. An intellect never questions authority. That's what they were doing. That's what they were saying. And those people, why now that we now know for sure that from Peter Hotez to Dr. Fauci to Walensky to Collins to every person on corporate news, they were lying about COVID, just like they lied about ivermectin and Joe Rogan, and they colored his skin green. And Sanjay Gupta admitted they were all lying about ivermectin on CNN. And they're still not mad at them. They still have all their ire is for people who question the official narrative. People still have ire for me. And I haven't, and they still call me anti-vaxxer. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And they'll never apologize. Kyle Kalinske did the same bullshit. Called people like me and me specifically an anti-vaxxer because I was right about COVID and he didn't know a goddamn thing about it. I don't understand how people aren't angry over COVID. I mean, angry over what the government did to them, because there was never any science for masks. There was never any science for lockdowns. There was never any science that said that we could vaccinate our way out of the pandemic. And I knew all that because I interviewed Dr. Robert Malone, the guy who invented the mRNA vaccine technology. No matter what the establishment news tells you, he was the first one. He invented it. He has 5 patents on vaccines. He's devoted his whole life to vaccines. He's not an anti-vaxxer. Right? He's a guy who's telling the truth, who's a doctor with an narrative that's counter to the big pharma. And that's why they made you think he was a kook, just like they have to make you think that RFK Jr. is a kook and that I'm a right winger and that Cornel West is a right winger. They have to discredit you. That's all they have is narrative control. And that's why it's so bad on Twitter. They've lost narrative control on Twitter. And that's why their hair's on fire trying to figure out. And you see remember when Elon Musk was everybody's hero, everybody's golden boy, and then all of a sudden he buys Twitter. He's the worst guy. He's a white supremacist.
I don't know. I think, I really applaud like people like Matt Taibbi for doing like the Twitter files and revealing all the information. And I think a lot of us, we had a feeling those things were happening. I just didn't have proof. And then after the Twitter files, we had proof that they were suppressing certain people and certain information. And even politicians like Adam Schiff had his hand in suppressing people on Twitter. And I think more people should be alarmed by what was revealed from the Twitter files, and people should not be attacking people like Matt Taibbi for doing his job as a journalist. So to me, it was really interesting. Did you notice, Jimmy, how people just turned on Matt Taibbi that quickly? All of a sudden, people who applauded his work, they were like, oh my God, Matt Taibbi's right wing. He's gone, astray. Don't listen to him now. That quickly, they will turn on you.
They did that to me when they did that to me already. It's happened to me several times over and over. The first time was when I wouldn't vote for Hillary Clinton. They did that. And the second time was when I told the truth about the Syrian war. The third time was when I interviewed a Boogaloo boy. That oh my God. Yeah. You'd have thought I started a chapter of the Hitler Youth in my neighborhood. And so yeah, I see that's exactly the establishment now is run like a cult. And the establishment, I mean the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, and you're not allowed to step outside that cult, because when you do, isn't that cult-like behavior? Of course, that's what that is. Cult-like behavior is you're not allowed to have a thought that goes against the group. And if you do, you're an out. And that's the fear they use of being ostracized from polite society, from their cult. And that's all they have not left now. And of course, that's what they do.
That's right. And they'll do it to anyone. Like those of you watching, they'll do it to you too. Like you're they love you as long as you're going along with that narrative. But the moment that you try to go against it, they'll they'll do it to anyone. So,
Like,
don't think that you're immune.
they'll do it to an officer currently serving officer in their illegal wars. They did it to Tulsi Gabbard. She's serving in those wars currently. She's wearing the uniform, and they still did it to her. So you're right. They'll do it to anybody. Well, they did it to a president forever. They called President Trump a traitor to our country, which now the Durham report reveals that it was completely made up by the Hillary Clinton campaign and the FBI and the CIA, that they all knew this was a hoax, and they pushed it anyway. Why? Because Donald Trump is an outsider. When I try to remind people is what I don't like Donald Trump, but what they're doing to him is exactly what they would be doing to Bernie Sanders if Bernie Sanders actually had a nutsack and grabbed power, but he doesn't. And so they don't do that to him. But when he was a threat to the establishment in the primary, what did they do? They Russiagated him. They said Russia was supporting his candidacy. Who said that? The Washington Post. That's who said that. And they also said that his followers were misogynists, that they were violent, and they were sexists and racists. All those things. That's exactly what they do to Trump and MAGA. And so Bernie Sanders was scared of that, and so he rolled over for the party and the establishment, which he does all the time. So that's what people don't realize. And I don't hear anybody else. Nobody pushes back at me when I say that, because they know inherently that is true. And that's exactly why Bernie Sanders didn't do what he did, because he didn't want to be treated like Donald Trump. He didn't want to be treated like Ralph Nader. He doesn't have the nutsack to do that. But what he should have done was been honest and said, I don't have the nutsack to do this. And I wish somebody would be a leader for my followers, because they really want someone to be a leader. And now that's why there's nothing, the Bernie Sanders, half the voting Democrats in the primary in 2016 wanted to get rid of the Democratic Party. They hated CNN and MSNBC, and they wanted to get corporate money out of their party, right? That's all gone. The Bernie Sanders, you hear no one saying that anymore. None of that. No, it's all over, and it's all about we have to stop fascism. Well, Joe Biden is a bigger fascist than Donald Trump, and I'll debate anybody on that. That's just a fact. And so when people say that Joe Biden is some kind of an antidote to Donald Trump, Joe Biden is worse. He's a worse president than Donald Trump. And again, by any metric, he is worse.
Yeah, one thing I will tell people is that just because you can dislike Donald Trump, but just because you dislike him doesn't mean he colluded with Russia.
That's right.
It's just like,
right. And if they can do that to a president of the United States, they'll do that to anybody. They did that in lieu of killing him, like they did to Kennedy. They couldn't discredit Kennedy like that, so they just killed him. Same thing with RFK. And so, but they could discredit Donald Trump because he had a comb over and he's been a clown in our society for 30 years or 40. And so it was easier to do that to him than someone else. And Donald Trump didn't have any allies inside the Republican Party because he didn't come up through the Republican Party.
Right.
And nobody owed him favors. And so that's why the Republicans establishment and the donor class hates Donald Trump. That's the difference between him and Joe Biden. The biggest difference between Donald Trump and Joe Biden is the donor class hates Donald Trump and they love Joe Biden.
Right, because what did we find out from Tucker Carlson? That one of the plans for Fox News was to support Ron DeSantis this time around and not to support Donald Trump because the donors plan to back Ron DeSantis, and that's how it works.
Oh, I didn't know that Tucker revealed that. That's interesting. Of course, that's the truth.
Yeah. They had already decided, Rupert Murdoch had already decided we're going with DeSantis this time around, not Donald Trump, because that's who the donors are backing. So that's how it works. Jimmy, I have one more thing for you. Recently, I know some people, and I want to get your take from this, because some people, I think they heard something that you said in reference to reparations, and some people, I think, may have. So, I got to ask the question. So it's like,
so I was doing a live stream. It was at the end of the stream, and I'm going to give myself a real generous reading on it. And so I was already tired, confused, doing a show. Somebody in the chat asked about reparations, and I must have just been talking about healthcare or something. And so just first off, I support reparations. That's the West. I do support reparations because if they can give $5 trillion to the richest 1,000 MFers in America during COVID, they could certainly give $5 trillion to African Americans, right? But my point is, it's never going to pass, right? And it's divisive. And so my point is that I think we could all work together to get health care for everybody. That would help the African American community, to get a living wage for everybody. We can all things we all agree on: a living wage, Medicare for all, cleaning out the prisons of nonviolent drug offenders, and investing in our communities. I think that is better. So that's what, if I could say it again, I would say it that way, instead of the way I said it, which was very inartful.
Yeah, I think Kim Iverson actually just recently had a discussion with Marcel. He actually ran for office. He ran for Congress. And that's one of his like big issues. He's a reparation activist. This is the guy that Marianne Williamson actually shouted down at her own event.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. He had the data correct and she had the data incorrect, but she shouted him down. And that's why I was like, that wasn't a good idea for her to do that. But I think, Kim had that discussion with him. And I think one of the things that he did mention, and I think people need to understand, is that it can't be based on like skin color. It has to be based on lineage. And there's a couple of reasons for that. But one is because the 14th Amendment can just come in and overturn it. But it is important that it is based on lineage. But then also, too, I think it would be good if you had that discussion with someone like Marcel or someone like Dr. Sandy Darity, because they've done the research for it. But I get where you're coming from about the universal programs. I totally agree with like all of that. I think just what we found from the research, though, is that even after all those universal programs are implemented, we would still be at the bottom. So I think that's a big part of the push. But yeah, I had to ask, Jimmy. Sorry, I had to ask.
I'm glad you asked. I appreciate the opportunity to clarify what I meant by that. So I really do actually appreciate it. So thanks for bringing that up.
Awesome. All right, Jimmy. So one more question, because I know you have to get going soon too. So I know you're going to be taking a break, or two-week break.
Yeah, till July 10th. We'll be back in studio July 10th.
Okay, so is anyone filling in for you?
No. The whole company's shut down for 2 weeks.
Oh, wow. Okay. So just wanted to make sure I cleared that up so people wouldn't be confused and be like, where is Jimmy? I haven't seen him live for like 2 weeks.
Okay.
All right. Okay, Jimmy.
I appreciate it, Sabby. Thanks for having me on. It's always great to see you.
All right, Seam. Bye.